bunch of paintings. The building that's over here used to have a bunch of squash courts in it that had been converted into painting studios. And my senior year, my project was to do a bunch of these great big paintings, and then I exhibited them. So I absolutely love the fact that you can paint with words. I think that you can paint a picture, you can, if you use the right words, you can say amazing things and get people to see things in their minds. I love short. And I'm going to read you, I think you're a plant. He and I have never met before, I want you to know this. But one of the little epigraphs in my book that it starts with is this little quote from a poet. This is a poet you probably have never heard of, but where is he? This is a poet named Robert Southey, who was a British poet who lived from 1774 to 1843. And this is, I started my book with this. This is how important I feel about that idea of fewer words. With words as with sunbeams, the more they're condensed, the deeper they burn. So what does that mean? Right? That means that you get rid of all the extra stuff, you cut out all the extraneous stuff, you just really condense it down. It's like a sunbeam. It's like you take a magnifying glass, right, and you put it in front of the sun, and you can light fires with it. It gets that hot and that strong, right? And then the idea of uniqueness and variety. Well, this book has 70, I can't remember, it's like 73 different chapters in it. And each chapter is headed by a little tiny poem that I invented, what I call this new genre of poetry I invented called a poe, which is literally no more than about 4 or 5 words, right? So, and I made up some rules for myself, which were that I didn't want the words to be longer than I didn't want the poem to be longer than 4 or 5 words. I wanted it to rhyme, because otherwise, there's a lot of longer poetry that doesn't have to rhyme, but I figured it was going to be really short. It had to rhyme, otherwise it could just be any words sort of thrown together. And when I sat down to write this book, this book is a memoir. Now you guys all know what a memoir is, right? Memoir is pretty, you know what a memoir is? What? You know what a memoir is? Memoir.
Memoir? Isn't that article that someone memorizing other dead people or?
That's a memorial. How about you? You know what a memoir is? Sure, you. Why not?
Isn't it a book about somebody's life?
It is. And what makes a memoir is it's usually a specific period in somebody's life, whereas an autobiography covers their whole life, right? So the difference between autobiography and memoir is that usually when people get really old and they know they're not going to last much longer, they write the autobiography about their whole life. A memoir is usually about a specific period in somebody's life. This memoir covers a specific small period in my life when I was hit by a car and suffered a traumatic brain injury and then had to go through therapy and struggle to come back from it. It covers a period of about 8 years. Fortunately, I'm not old enough to write an autobiography yet. I got a few years before that. Anyway, so, and memoirs are very popular right now. You'll see a lot of them out there on the bestseller list. But I didn't want to write a conventional memoir. I wanted to do something a little different, a little creative. If it's one thing I learned from going to Nichols and going to Skidmore College where I went, the current motto of the college that I went to is creative thought matters. And I learned that at Nichols from my teachers at Nichols, to think outside the box and not just be a sheep and do what everybody else does, but really to think creatively and come up with new and different ways of doing things and saying things. It doesn't matter whether you're an artist or a writer or a bank president or a lawyer, that idea of thinking differently and thinking creatively. I'll tell you a really quick short story. When I was at Skidmore, even though I was an art major, I took a business class because I was interested in business. And, and I took the exam, and I got a higher score than anybody else in the exam out of like 50 kids. And the teacher called me in and she's like, all right, who are you? Like, I don't even know who you are. I know all the other kids, they're all business majors, they've taken classes with me, like, who are you? And I said, I don't know. All I can tell you is that I was taught to think creatively because I was taught more from an idea of a writerly standpoint and an artistic standpoint. And so it enabled me to think up creative solutions to the business problems that you were giving these kids. And the other kids didn't have that skill. They didn't know how to sort of think of creative new solutions to problems. So anyway, that idea of uniqueness, doing something differently, of everything being different, is something that I really wanted to get across in this book. And so I wrote a different kind of a memoir. I wrote a memoir that has all these little short chapters, little short poems. And I'll read you just one of my favorite little short poems that everybody seems to like. If I can find it. I just had it and I lost it. Anyway, I can tell you I know it. It's about my dog, Henry. And the little short poem that I wrote about my dog, Henry, is Crazy, Wild, Golden Child. Simple as that, right? It's a pretty small number of words, right? Yeah. And he is. Noel will attest, he's nuts. He's 11 years old and he still jumps all over everybody. He's crazy. He's a nutty dog. And that then precedes the whole chapter that I wrote. Also, the idea that Larry was talking about putting things together, about being creative, about how to put things together, and he was talking about his seniors doing collages and little poems and essays and all that sort of thing. One of the things that he was alluding to is that after my accident, I couldn't remember anything. I had what they called retrograde amnesia. I couldn't remember the accident. I couldn't remember the months leading up to the accident. And for months after the accident, I had trouble remembering. I still have trouble remembering things. Where am I? Oh, yeah, I'm at Nichols. Okay. So I had to act like a reporter, like a journalist. I had to go back and sort of piece together what had happened to me and piece together my life. And I had to go to accident reports and eyewitness reports and family members and friends and kind of try and pull it all together. And it was really weird and interesting to write about yourself that way, to sort of step back and look at yourself and write about your own life that way. And it was very illuminating. You learn a lot when you write about yourself and about your life, whether you've had a head injury or not, figuring out why you've done certain things and what you've done and that sort of thing. And I could have done it just through straight poetry as well. I mean, poetry is a wonderful thing. And I actually, when I started this book, that was going to be my intent. I was actually going to write a poetry book. And I was going to write all these little short poems. And then I thought, well, I've got more I want to say, so I'm going to add some little essays to the poems, and then I'm going to do some other things. And it kind of grew. This book took me 3 years, although I like to say it really took me 52 years, because it's the culmination of everything that I learned over 52 years. And I had to go back and back and back and do it again and again and again and rewrite it. And every time I thought I knew where I was going with it, I had to, something else happened and my brain went, oh, well, let's try this. Let's do this differently. And so that whole idea of pushing it and keeping going and re-editing and rewriting, and that's a very sort of famous saying among most writers, which is, I'm not a very good writer, but I'm a very good rewriter. And so whatever you write the first time, if it comes out great, God bless you, and more power to you. But for most of us, it doesn't happen that way. So that's enough of me talking.